why did adult people fall for no touch knockouts and no touch and energy, self-defense maneuvers that don't work, leading into now you have these women falling for no touch orgasms? Like how is this becoming a thing, and how does this apply to actual real sex and real orgasms? First, we need to look at the placebo effect. All right, the placebo effect is very powerful. You can use the placebo effect. In fact, we want to use the placebo effect to our advantage when we're dealing with our performance psychology. If you believe in something and believe something is true, it often becomes true because your mind believes it. So you feel like it's true, and the actions you take are as if the thing that you're thinking is true. And then it sort of, you get some results out of that. You know what I mean? Now, this unfortunately can be used in a bad way, and we don't want placebo if we're trying to cure a debilitating disease necessarily. But even then, though, placebo has been helpful for disease. Like if people believe a certain exercise protocol will help them lose weight, whether it's the best protocol or not isn't as important as them believing in it and then doing it. And then the consistency of taking those actions can cause the weight loss, even if it's not the best program, even if it's not fully backed in all the science and all that stuff. So there is an element of placebo effect that's happening when these girls are having these no touch orgasms and doing this stuff. There's an element of group think and group effect, right? And there's a definite element of hypnotic suggestibility. So here's the thing. We've done research. There's hypnosis studies going back to 1985, and I am a master hypnotherapist. I will tell you there's a lot of placebo effect, and there's a lot of bullshit in hypnotherapy too. And I'm saying that with somebody who is a certified master hypnotherapist. I do hypnotherapy, science-based hypnotherapy with clients, and we get really effective results. Again, things rooted in reality can give you some great results. But there is, as a hypnotherapist, I have to be careful about this placebo effect. And if I'm using it, at least we need to be aware of it. It's okay to have a belief and have the placebo effect work to your advantage. But it's problematic if you are attributing something. If you don't know the reality of what's going on, it can be problematic. Okay. Now, what we found is that fantasy and hypnosis can trigger an orgasm for a woman. It doesn't work quite as well for men, although, men can have the feeling of experience an orgasm, but it's not very well supported that a man will actually ejaculate or orgasm from just fantasy or not being touched. All right. But women can. So there is a mind-body connection that happens with orgasms and with women and especially. All right. And so that's something to be aware of, that this mind-body connection is really important, because there's something called, women can have a mind-induced climax, and that is backed by scientific studies, right? It's a psychosomatic response. And so what that means is, yes, the body is responding. So a woman's body does respond to sex in a certain way. However, it's how her mind is framing and responding to that sex. That's what makes all the difference as to whether or not she experiences pleasure in an orgasm or whether maybe she experiences pain. Okay, even. So let me, illustrate that even a little bit better for you. So it's like a woman's brain can disassociate from her body, and it can cause her to not experience pleasure, not experience an orgasm. Think about sex for a minute. Like, yes, there are different ways to physically stimulate the vagina, the clitoris, the different erogenous zones inside the vagina, like the G spot, the A spot. And a lot of that stuff is tied to the clitoral organ, which envelops the opening and travels through the vaginal canal The clitoris is not just on the outside of the body, even though that's where most of the largest concentration of the nerve endings are on that little, the clitoral button under the hood that's outside of the body. That's not the only place where there's erogenous zones that create orgasm. Women can have deep body orgasms and stuff like that from those erogenous zones inside, and that stimulation, as well as the outer clitoral stimulation from what's under the hood. So there's your anatomy, quick anatomy lesson, but that is not as important as what's happening psychologically, believe it or not. There's only so many different ways to take a thing and go in and out of a thing. You know what I mean? Like this, like sex is not that complicated. Yes, there are different ways and subtle ways to physically stimulate certain areas better. That's true. And those are things that, again, I teach when asked, and by sometime in the beginning of next year, there's going to be a sexual psychology course that will drop and for members of my community. So that is coming up, and we're developing that material through some of my mastermind calls. So that stuff will happen. We're going to be talking a lot more about sex behind the community, because that's where I can do that safely without dealing with censorship. And then we'll talk about the physical techniques, but most men are struggling quietly. They look strong on the outside, but inside they feel uncertain in life, in work, and even in their relationships. I've spent years studying human behavior, persuasion, and performance psychology, helping men rebuild their confidence from the inside out. Because when your inner game is weak, it shows up everywhere, in your mood, your money, and how you show up with women. In our community, we focus on both inner game and outer game, so you can become the kind of man who leads with strength, clarity, and genuine presence. If you're tired of drifting, tired of feeling unsure, tired of getting poor results in your life, and ready to start showing up as the man you are meant to be, this is your call. Click the link, it's free to start, and join the brotherhood now. What your guy brain needs to understand, though, is the physical technique is not really as important as what's happening psychologically. The physical part of what's happening just has to be stimulating enough. There's a mind-body connection, and what's psychologically stimulating frames the physical stimulation, not so much the other way around. I'm not saying that sex is not a physical act. It's not that the orgasm for a woman is completely psychological and completely, divorced from her body. That's not the case, because it's actually her psychological frame, or her mind, that has to connect to her body to feel and to experience those sensations at a deeper level in order to have more intense sexual experiences. But that being said, though, it's the psychology that counts. What's happening in her mind, and how to mentally, and also it's emotionally and neurologically connect to her body and experience what she's experiencing. That's going to make the difference. She could have, for example, the same size things and the same technique going in and out of her body from a guy that she has less desire for, is less attractive, maybe even in case of being assaulted. All right. And she could completely disassociate her body and experience no pleasure from that. Let's talk about that in real life now, for some of you guys who listen to me, who have experienced this. The wife, the woman you married, has gotten herself into this mental framework where she's so detached from you sexually and so unattracted to you as a husband that sex becomes a duty to her. So what does duty sex look like? What's that starfish sex? She's just a dead fish because she's disassociated her mind from her body, and what she's experiencing physically is very just a low level stimulation and not leading to an intense experience or an orgasm. Whereas then the guy she cheats with, or maybe an ex-boyfriend that she was really excited about years ago, that guy did less physical stimulation, and she had more mind-blowing orgasms and higher level of intensity, just because her brain connected to her body differently, and because her psychosomatic experience with that guy was different than the experience she's having with you during duty sex, because she's been married to you for a while and she's been practicing basically psychologically divorcing herself from that relationship. So there's a great scenario. The same woman with the same vagina under the same stimulus, right? Or even less stimulus in some cases, experiences higher level of pleasure with one psychological framework, lower levels of pleasure with another psychological framework. So the psychological framework and what's going on up here becomes the determining factor for her intense experiences or lack of intense experiences. This is why you guys who are so focused on the physical, because your guy brain wants to treat a woman's body like it's a fucking car, you know what I mean? Or something like you're going to open the hood and look at the parts. Let me see, like, what would be more interesting to most guys is if I showed a diagram of a vagina and had a bunch of labeled parts and said, and this is what you do. You press here and you vibrate that and you spit on this and you put some, you know what I mean? This is what you guys want. I know, because I've been fucking coaching for a long time. Whenever I'm like talking technique, guys are like, whoa, what's next? You know what I mean? What way do I, what way do I hoove at her clitoris so something happens? Like, I mean, that's what guys want. What's the move? You know what I mean? Let me watch some porn now. That's what gets a guy brain. But when I talk about the psychology, some people are interested, but I get less. It's just less interesting for a lot of guys. They want to see boobies and holes and butts, and they want to know the ways to touch them. That's how your guy brain works. But you got to grow from that, or you're never gonna fucking have the sexual experiences you want. It's what's going on in the brain, okay? And seduction happens up here. It's what's going on in the brain that causes her to connect with her body, so that whatever moves you're doing on her body actually have the effect that you're looking for. And the reason this guy can do these psychic or energy orgasms and all this stuff is because the girl is in a psychological framework. Now, some of those girls are just faking it and doing it for attention and doing it to be part of the crowd. So there's an element of that. But when you do something hard enough and long enough, you tend to, just like what that girl said in the National Geographic video, when you see it enough, do it enough, whatever, you begin to believe in it. So when the women are doing it and going through the motions, even just to be socially accepted by the other women and maybe to get a little bit of attention by doing their fake orgasm, well, they're doing it. So that grows into psychologically being open to maybe a real orgasm. So some of these girls are actually having real orgasmic experiences from this grifter or charlatan because of the hypnotic aspect of orgasms and because of this mind-body connections. And the sad part is many of these women have been probably married and divorced and had guys who had no idea what to do with their vaginas because they couldn't. And the women would be like, oh, it's me. I have a problem with orgasms. Maybe it is, but also what it is a psychological framework. And the guy she was with is not trained on how to break through that psychological framework. You guys need to get trained on how to break through that psychological framework and have her psychologically connected to her body and open to orgasm. You, as the guy leading in the bedroom, need to know how to do that. That's something I teach in my community with guys who ask, and it's something I'll have in a course eventually, okay? Because if you don't do that, she's not going to have that experience. And that's what you guys want. I mean, you guys want genuine desire. You want a chick to love you. You want her to not cheat on you. All the things you want that you come to my channel for, you got to fuck her the right way. That's how that works. And you're not going to do that if you can't get into her brain and her mind.